Hi friends, welcome to the channel. Hit the like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment with an emoji just for the sake of engagement.
The manhwa started with a bustling city scene with people murmuring. The roads were filled with cars, and a young girl was lying in the middle of the road on the crossing, covered in blood, on a heap of scattered papers. She was an ordinary university student who did nothing but slave away every day for her professors. With the last strength in her body, all she could think was how unfair it was for her to die in this way. But suddenly, she came back to life. She was in front of a mirror, shocked and confused to see her face. She realized that she had entered the world of the silly romance novel she was reading before she died. She had been reincarnated into the body of one of the characters from the novel. It wasn't just anybody but the body of the villain, who met a horrible death at the end. Heartbroken, she began to think about what course of action she should take, as if the story went as intended, then the two male leads would kill her. She began tearing up, thinking she's going to die early, just like she had died in her previous life. Her thought was broken when someone called her by the character's name, Syria. In the next scene, she was seen sitting on the lap of a divine beast, bathing together. While brushing her hair from her face, he asked Syria why she's making that troubled face again. With a troubled look, he asked Syria if she was still thinking about that rascal, Callus Hanaton. Supporting herself, she called in Rush and told him that it's impossible for her to think of that man as she's his wife. As he gently kissed Syria, she shuddered with pleasure and thought to herself that it's only natural for everyone to hate her as she had possessed this body. The hot hunk reminded Syria to hold him close to her, as he's the only one in this world who could make her an archduchess. Chapter 1. We saw Syria and a nurse casually chatting as she was sipping tea. The nurse told Syria that the future of the empire was looking bright as a saint had finally descended from the heavens. She compared it to a blessing from the heavens. The scene then showed a young man following and guarding the saint. As it was freezing, the man wrapped the saint in some type of clothing, indicating that they were really close. The nurse, seeing this, was very envious. However, our protagonist shook with anger seeing their interaction. It turned out that man was Callus, and he was the groom of our heroine Syria. Their wedding was only a week away. All she wanted to do was march down there and rip his hair out, but she restrained herself as there were a lot of eyes on her. Casually, she joked that her fiancé was a social creature. She started coughing and shivering, which prompted the nurse to ask whether she had not yet recovered from the cold and promised to prepare some medication for her in the evening. Their conversation was hindered when the Archduke visited them and asked the nurse whether she was planning to spend the whole day on the terrace with her patient. Syria bowed, seeing the Archduke. "If you stayed out on the terrace, your condition would worsen," he said to Syria. He was dissatisfied with her fiancé for making a scene. Syria apologized on her fiancé's behalf. He exclaimed that the saint, was to be escorted to the high church ASAP, as he didn't want any more disturbances in his palace. Syria thought to herself that although the duke seemed cold now, soon he would be gazing at the saint with loving eyes, as that was the fate of the male lead at the end of the story. She reminisced that all of them were characters in a romance novel about a dimension-jumping heroine named Lena, who fell into another world and was showered with love and admiration by the male leads. She, on the other hand, was Syria Stern, the villain of the story, who suffered a very horrible and tragic death. Syria inherited the power of the gods and was granted the title Stun. Although she was the most holy being in the empire, that didn't stop her from committing depravities. It's as if she liked being wicked. She was described as a troublemaker in high society. Her pastime was indulging in extravagance and dissipating being her specialty. Even her relationship with her own family was atrocious. But she was just a normal student who now resided in Syria's body. She was only thinking about one thing right now: she did not want to die. She thought to herself, of all the characters, why did it have to be Syria? She had already met an untimely demise in her past life. Before Lena, the main character, showed up, she planned on getting rid of all of Syria's enemies. In the uphill, lonely struggle to change Syria's reputation, she apologized, bought a lot of gifts for people around her, and even used her powers as a Stern to heal Callus, the second lead, when he was hurt in a battle. She even gathered herbs from the cliffs below the church, risking her life in the cold for him. One of the characters that killed her in the story was Callus, so she had to find a way to make him like her. And just like that, slowly with time, the second lead fell in love with her in the process, until finally one day he proposed to her. Syria thought since the original story ended with the main leads falling in love with each other and Callus committed suicide in despair, this new development would be a win-win situation. So she made a vow that she would not get tangled up with the two leads at all costs. The main lead's love story would run much more smoothly than it did in the novel, and the Saint and the Duke would soon make a connection. She clearly promised that, but the Saint ended up coming to her place to meet her. She was Lena, the Saint from another world. Chapter 2. Lena introduced herself and admitted that she's a bit embarrassed because others kept calling her a saint just because she's from another world. Syria acknowledged her presence but was bothered as she's trying to avoid this girl. Lena asked Syria whether her wedding dress fitting was that day. She exclaimed that she's very excited to see a wedding gown from another world. She also said that she wanted to see the whole fitting process, and Syria's fiancé, Callus, intended for her to be here for the process. Hearing Lena call Callus by first name, Syria was agitated, as it took her 11 months to get him to let her call him by name. But when she heard Lena wanted to watch her change into her wedding gown, Syria was perplexed at the thought that Lena wanted to watch her undressed. She was relieved when designer Begonia entered the room and asked Saint Lena to leave at once, as being fitted for one's matrimonial attire wasn't some sort of spectacle. Furthermore, the privileges were only extended to the bride's close relatives and friends. She, for once, did not fall into any of the categories. Lena was startled and apologized. She mentioned that she had not yet gotten used to the customs of the new world and pardoned herself after greeting Syria. Syria remembered that Begonia was also a villain in the story, and Callus ended up firing her for being cruel to Lena. Later that night, Callus was seen having a discussion with Syria. He wanted to change the designers. He was furious and claimed Syria must know why he wanted the change. As Saint Lena was someone who descended from the heavens, she was different from the rest of the nobles. This angered Syria. Callus claimed that even if the designer did not understand the heart of a saint, she should not have spoken so harshly to her, and it was best if she dismissed her. Syria countered by saying Begonia was only telling her not to make a spectacle of her from a noble's point of view. Saint Lena's remarks were rather discourteous, and Callus abruptly stopped her, saying Lena was only there for Syria. Syria asked Callus if she called the saint by the name in front of her. He quickly accepted that it was his mistake and asked Syria to be understanding as she had been appointed as the saint's protector. Syria remembered that in the original storyline, Lena's divine powers became highly unstable after she fell into this new world. The High Church appointed her a protector among the heads of 17 houses that possessed the power of gods. Callus was the head of House Hanaton, so it's only natural that they grew close pretty quickly, but she didn't expect that to happen now that she was engaged to Callus. "Are you dismayed that I failed to mention my appointment as the saint's guardian?" Callus asked Syria. Syria realized that she may have been too complacent. If she got angry, things may end as terribly as they did in the book. Suppressing her anger, she said she understood the situation, as she could not let herself die, and was going to do everything she could to stay alive this round. Hearing her words, Callus was relieved and hugged her, stating that he was afraid that she was upset. Callus thanked her for being understanding and called her his beloved. In the next scene, Callus was seen hurriedly leaving the palace in a hurry as Lena's divine power became unstable, and he wanted to attend to her immediately. Hearing him call Lena her name again angered Syria, but she hurriedly left the palace and traveled towards the glacier for her task. On the way, we meet Elliot, the Knight Commander of House Burke. He said that he heard Syria suffering from a cold, and it seemed that that day's inspection of the glacier had overtaxed her. She dismissed his concerns, saying this was something she must do, and it's absolutely alright. Within House Burke's dominion rested an extraordinary mass of ice known as the Beast Tomb. House Burke was charged with periodically checking the barrier around the glacier to prevent the emergence of monsters, which required the power of the gods wielded by Stearns to do so. In the original story, Syria would occasionally put off going to the lake for inspections, but now the female lead had to solidify her position and survive this, so she had to properly carry out the duties. After finishing her duties that day, Elliot asked Syria to head back but was stopped by the arrival of Duke. Chapter 3. Duke asked Syria if she was not hearing him speak, to which Syria wondered if she did something wrong. Duke asked her for the possible reason for her to be coming out to the lake in winter while afflicted with the cold. Syria thanked him for his concern but said it's not severe, and this was something she must do as a stern, to which the Duke asked her about when she began taking her duties so seriously and mocked her by saying that it's an attempt to weaken her health even more so that she might catch her fiancé's attention. On hearing these remarks, Sir Elliot was shocked. Syria exclaimed that she didn't come here with that intention, and regardless of how sick she was, her fiancé would never cause a disturbance in his palace. Disregarding her claims, the Duke asked her if it's because of the saint. Syria was perplexed, thinking whether Callas was having an affair with the saint. Interrupting her thought, the Duke asked whether she had finished with the inspection, to which the knight answered positively. He thanked Lady Syria for her hard work and claimed that they were able to finish the task in short time, otherwise, it would have taken half a day longer. Syria was bothered by the Duke's behavior, wondering why he was acting all high and mighty. She agreed to the fact that he was the main lead and too damn handsome, but wondered why he was such an ass. While making eye contact, the Duke asked them to return to the palace, as they must not allow their precious Stern's health to deter them anymore. He put his own cloak on Syria's shoulder as she was shivering from the cold, which shocked her. Returning to the castle, she kept thinking about what happened with the Duke and wondered if he liked her more than she thought. Regardless, it would be best for her to avoid him as much as possible, as there was something about him that scared her heart the most, not to mention the way he talks. She just wanted to wrap up the wedding as soon as possible so she could get out of this place. The only reason she was staying here in the palace was because Sterns were considered to be such holy figures that they could only take part in certain rituals, such as wedding vows, at a limited number of locations, one of which was here in the House of Burke, which guards the frozen lake. She wanted to avoid holding the wedding here at all costs because this was the place where the two main characters got married at the end of the story. Saint Lena was also a Stern, she was the main character, but it's a bit contrived. She wondered if the original Syria was jealous of her because of this fact. It was only revealed at the very end that Lena was Stern, so if she just got married quickly with the second lead and exited the castle, she should be fine. In the next scene, we met Abigail, Syria's escort, and seeing her, Syria got excited and asked her about the beast expedition she had been on. She asked her if she was back in one piece or if she was injured, to which Abigail asked Syria to calm down as Abigail was a former assassin. Syria whispered and asked whether she killed anybody by any chance, to which the latter replied that she never touched anyone but criminals. She claimed that everything went well, but she missed Syria when the armor turned cold. Syria exclaimed that she should have gone along as one of the biggest reasons why this world required Sterns was because the armor was created using the constellation steel. The special armaments known as star armor protected their wearers from being poisoned by magic. The knights who battled demonic beasts held Sterns in high esteem because without their help, their body heat would be stolen away by prolonged contact. "Hurry inside," said Abigail to Syria, as she was prone to catching a cold. Hearing these words, Syria wondered if this was the exact reason why Duke was acting so concerned. She smiled happily at Abigail, who went inside the castle to hear about all her experiences. She decided to solidify her usefulness before Lena realized that she was also Stern. Unknown to her, Lena was watching them from the upper room with jealousy-filled eyes. She asked her attendee why Syria visited the glacier every day. Her attendant answered that because she was a Stern, only she could purify the lake barrier, and because of that, she had been earning praise throughout the palace recently for her diligence in carrying out her duties. Lena envisaged her and asked whether she couldn't get the title herself. She was told that she was already a saint. Lena wondered if the title of Stern was more dashing, and because of that, everyone in the palace was interested in Syria. On hearing that, her attendant told her that there would be a welcome reception soon in her honor, although she would have to learn all the proper forms of etiquette. Besides, not just anyone could become a Stern, they were the children with divine power who were born on Wednesdays in winter, and each of them had a star somewhere on their bodies. Lena was extremely jealous and envious of the title, even though she was a saint herself. Chapter 4. The scene opened with Syria and her attendants sitting in her room. The attendant told Syria that her birthday was coming soon, to which Syria responded by saying that since she was busy, she had totally forgotten about the winter Wednesday night. Syria was born on a winter Wednesday. A person must meet several conditions in order to be bestowed with such a title. A child born on Monday had a lovely face. A child born on Tuesday was filled with God's grace. A child born on Wednesday was full of sorrow, but a child born on Thursday was filled with all the love of tomorrow. In the original novel, a child born on Friday showed kindness and grace, but she thought it was too unfair to those who were born on Wednesday. Syria thought it was unfair when she heard the poem in charge, but after she was awakened, she secretly fell in love with having a Winter Wednesday birthday. She officially became a stern on her 15th birthday. When the awakening of her spiritual powers was heralded by the appearance of a small star on her ivory neck, she immediately abandoned her family name and began proudly using the title in its place. Because of that, her already poor relationship with her family grew even worse. Her attendant informed her that the saint had continued to show great interest in the constellation stele, which had become quite concerning. Syria asked if it was dangerous for her to get close to the constellation stele before her powers had stabilized. She had such an inquisitive nature, her attendant exclaimed. Syria agreed with the statement and stated that you could expect it from a typical female lead. She wondered if she should worry too much, as in the story Lena awakened as a stern after touching a constellation stele monolith. Regarding her concern, she stated that once a wedding was over, she just needed to go live quietly in House Hanaton's dominion until the rest of the story played out well. At least that's what she was planning on, but she kept bumping into the Duke. Now the scene opened from a few minutes earlier. Syria was in the Green Garden Vault, and she was thinking that it didn't matter how many times she had seen the silver laurel bows, they were still amazing. If a stern were to become a plant, they would just look like this one. Inspecting the glacier wasn't possible without it. The branches had the power to both strengthen and purify the barrier. It was also used as a substitute when the stern wasn't available. While she was happily leaving the garden, thinking of asking Abigail to come along with her that day, she bumped into that Duke who was amazed to see her in such high spirits, and she offered her greetings to him. As she was gathering all the branches that had fallen because they bumped into each other, she was surprised when the Duke reached down and started gathering the branches along with her. The Duke asked whether she was visiting the frozen lake again that day, which took Syria by complete surprise, and she answered positively, but the Duke was puzzled, as he was aware that ample care had already been taken with her chambers. So does she find them lacking? Syria did not understand the question, but the Duke continued that it hardly seemed necessary for her to inspect the glacier with such zeal. Wasn't her recent diligence because she wanted something? He asked, to which she replied that it wasn't, but was cut short when the Duke replied that every time she visited the palace, she ran about freaking whenever something wasn't to her liking. Telling her that over 100 servants were left bedridden after serving her, to which Syria replied that this was exactly why she must work harder around here for the sake of the 100 people's past suffering. The Duke chuckled as he found her to be quite enigmatic. He explained that it may prove something of a pity when she left for House Hanaton. Syria was confused by the behavior of the Duke, as she had never witnessed or read about the Duke behaving this way. Once she finished her work near the lake, she came into the castle, and while she was enjoying a steaming cup of tea, the maid came to let her know that her wedding presents had just arrived and asked her to look at them. The sapphire was sent by Marquis Hanaton himself. The color was so deep Syria couldn't focus on anything she was hearing as her mind trailed back to the things the Duke told her. She felt some kind of relief hearing that male leads say such things about her and thought this might give some sort of guarantee that she would make it through without dying. Now she could focus on her wedding. The maid came to her, presenting a bracelet that she had asked for, opening the box, and reminiscing about the moment Callus had given her so much in the past. She wanted to return the favor by giving him the bracelet before the ceremony, and the maids all blushed about the fact that she was going to give this to Marquis. Syria's mind wandered to the fact that Lena discovered a magic crystal mine in the original story until that happened. These crystals were considered extremely precious gems, so she was sure her fiancé would like them. At that exact moment, the door burst open, and the healer came in shouting that it was a catastrophe. The Saint Lady Lena collapsed after touching the constellation stele monument. The monument itself turned transparent and began to shine, which meant a new stern was born. Chapter 5. The next chapter followed Syria as she was entering the bedchambers of Saint Lena. She was thinking in her mind that it didn't make sense because they were still in the early stages of the story. The awakening definitely happened near the end. The Duke entered the chambers asking for the saint's condition, and the maids reported that the worst had passed, fortunately thanks to Marquis Hanaton's presence at her side. Hearing that, Syria glanced at her fiancé, who hadn't even looked at her from the moment she entered and didn't even notice as he was holding the hands of the saint. Later that evening, after leaving the chambers, the Duke asked Lady Syria whether she was also afflicted this way when she awakened, to which she responded that her divine power was nowhere near as immense as hers. The effects a person experienced from constellation stele were directly proportional to the magnitude of their powers, which meant there was no way the saint was unaware of the fact that her body was overflowing with divine power, which enraged the Duke as she still insisted on touching the constellation stele and causing such an uproar in his palace. The priest replied that perhaps she never entertained the possibility that she could also be a stern. The Duke angrily asked the priest whether he was not the one who was overseeing the lessons, then why would she do such a thing? The priest responded that it's because she felt a vague sense of admiration for Lady Syria, which shocked Syria to her core. The priest apologized to the Duke, and the Duke accepted the apology by saying at least the priest had some awareness. Syria, on the other hand, was contemplating whether the saint touched it because she admired her or because she was checking her status as a saint. In the book, Lena accidentally came into contact with the constellation stele. Divine power was busted forth with the surge force, and it nearly killed her. The truth of her being a stern was finally revealed, so did she touch it on purpose? This time she was perplexed about the plot being so different from the original, but suddenly Chief Aide Lennon disturbed her thinking by stating that the saint had awakened. The Duke tried to leave but was stopped when Lennon told him it would be nice to look into the matter for the sake of relations with the High Priest. The Duke answered as to whether he looked like a saint's nursemaid. Further begging, he asked Lady Syria to accompany him. The next scene showed Callus screaming Lena's name when he saw her opening her eyes. He asked Lena whether she had woken, and Lena replied that it hurt her body so much, to which Callus asked her not to worry and that she would be fine as he was right beside her. Abigail secretly asked Syria whether she should cut off his hand. The Duke begrudgingly asked the priest whether he was aware of the fact that the estate was extremely busy during winter. He also stated he didn't have the means to keep this nuisance in his place any longer. Syria was shocked hearing the Duke call the saint a nuisance. The Duke asked Lennon to send a word to the High Church that Saint Lena would be returning as soon as she was able to move. On hearing this statement, Callus responded by saying that the Duke's treatment was rather excessive and that it's not Lena's fault or choice to become ill. He also asked the Duke the meaning of calling an invalid a nuisance. The Duke calmly replied that he could speak as he wished in his own palace. Callus protested that it's still harsh because she was still invalid. After all, the Duke responded that it's good he mentioned that because, as far as he knew, his betrothed's condition was also far from ideal. He asked Callus whether his priorities were a bit skewed and people may mistake the saint as his fiancée, and at that moment, Callus looked at Syria's face. Syria didn't understand why, but it felt like she was on the side of the original Syria. She should be the one angry at Callus for tending to another woman and not Rushbert. She blamed herself for never letting go of her frustrations and just standing by quietly through everything for the sake of avoiding a serious fate. Breaking her thoughts, the Duke told Callus that this was the first serious wedding ceremony they had in a long time, and they must keep such vows sacred. Syria was feeling shamed and embarrassed. She wanted to go home to her place on Earth and live a peaceful life. She wanted Callus and Lena to leave her alone. And at that moment the Duke extended his arms and asked her permission to leave the room as the saint requires tranquility. Callus called out for Syria but was stopped when Lena called his name. Taking this opportunity, the Duke tenderly held her hands and asked her to leave the room with him. Chapter 6. The scene started with Syria gathering the branches in the garden, and she was reminiscing about how Callus was behaving when he was with Lena. She was sad that she hadn't heard a word from him since yesterday. At that very moment, the Duke entered the room and asked for Lady Syria. She honored him and thought about how he had rescued her from that dreadful situation. She thought she hadn't yet thanked him for his generosity. As she was about to thank him, the Duke intervened by asking her if she would be able to inspect the lake properly after what she went through yesterday. He stated that if she was using the inspection as a means of escape, she could simply keep herself in her room. Syria quickly dismissed his concerns and simply stated that she was fully aware of her duties and would never take such a thing lightly because she was a stern. At the very moment Callus entered the room, asking for Syria, he said he was looking for her and wondering where she had been. The Duke asked Callus whether he was invisible to him, as Callus didn't pay any attention to the Duke. Callus asked for forgiveness and stated that he couldn't find his fiancée anywhere and had spent the majority of the day searching for her but was shocked to see both of them together in the secluded spot. The Duke responded that he didn't recall ever granting him permission to enter the ward. He asked him if he was aware of the fact that no one besides the stern was allowed to enter without express approval as the Duke of the Palace. Callus chuckled and stated that he would gladly make any restitution once he returned to his land if the Duke had a specific sum in mind. Hearing that the Duke cut Callus mid-sentence and said that it's not his place to decide his own punishment, they shall follow the tradition of Hausberg. Raising his hand, he stated that one of the culprit's hands should be cleaved off the wrist. He asked Callus what he thought about the sentence. Callus responded that he was not aware that the Duke wanted his hand. Rush asked whether Callus was keen on a war breaking out between the houses. It looked like he was hungry for a war. Syria began wondering whether they would wage a war in winter just to prove their valor. She began thinking about whether they wanted everyone to freeze to death. The Duke mocked Callus by saying that if it was war that he wanted, he would gladly receive it, to which Callus replied that that was not who wanted the war. The Duke stated that he would urgently dispatch soldiers to his estate to figure things out. At that moment, Syria tugged at the coat of Rush and asked for his forgiveness for her behavior. She stated that waging a war because of something this minor would be cruel to the knights that were responsible for the glacier, and she begged him to show some benevolence that he had shown throughout. Promising that she would help Callus answer and vow to never do anything so disrespectful again. The Duke commented that Callus indeed had an excellent fiancé and left the place. Syria patted herself on the back for her achievement of preventing a war. Callus came near her to have a word, but she was not interested and started leaving the opposite way. Callus ran behind her and asked her how she could run off like she did, and the way she took hold of the clothing was very discreet. He was upset by the way she was behaving just because she was angry. On hearing the words, Syria stopped and asked him whether she really was the one who had been indelicate. Callus reminded Syria to be calm and told her that Lena was a delegate of the gods who came from a different world and had no one to rely on but him. Being his partner, she should at least understand his position. Syria stated that she was being understanding, but Callus was having none of it. Getting angry and spending time with another man without looking into his eyes was not a way to be understanding, he said. Syria responded that he exactly did the same thing with the saint, but when Callus disagreed with her claims, she yanked her hand from his grasp and said that they were indeed different because she was not the one who called the Archduke by his name in front of her partner. Callus wanted to calm down Syria's hand once again, but Syria had had enough and smacked her hand away from his grip, in the process hurting herself. Chapter 7. Syria's actions shocked Callus. He was shocked by the way she behaved and injured herself. Clenching her hand, Syria stated that if she were in his place, she would have asked to break off the engagement and propose to Saint Lena instead. Callus asked about what she was saying, not understanding where this was coming from as she was the one he loved. Syria couldn't believe a man who fondly holds hands with another woman in front of his partner. She knew that she didn't fall head over heels in love like the heroine, but she really did like Callus. Callus originally killed Syria and took his own life because he couldn't make Lena fall in love with him. Since the main characters already had a happy ending planned out for them, it would be alright if the two of them enjoyed a bit of happiness. This was how she was rationalizing her actions. With tears in her eyes, she confessed that she was very terrified of both of them when she saw them together. Hearing the confession, Callus held Syria's hands and promised that he would make everything right and asked her not to cry. He also apologized to her. He told her that day that he would leave for the estate as soon as the wedding was over. Once Lena recovered, he promised to never see her again. He made a promise to be her faithful husband. Syria thought that everything would work out if she put her trust in him, because trusting him was the easiest thing and the easiest way to prevent her fate. She made him promise not to be late on their wedding day, and Callus responded that she had no reason to be frightened, he would never do such a thing. The next scene showed a well-lit room, and we heard two people having a conversation. Callus mentioned to Lena that this would be the last day that they called each other by name. Lena wondered whether this had something to do with his fiancé. Lena stated that Viscount Ison had already lectured her on this topic, so she supposed this meant they had to refer to each other by their official titles. Callus told her that was correct, and it would be difficult for them to continue to meet each other after the wedding. Heartbroken, Lena told him that he was such a dear friend, if only they could have met sooner. Callus reached his hand out to comfort Lena, and in that moment he saw the bracelet. When asked about the item, Callus complimented her perception and answered that it was a gift from Syria. Lena stated that she would like more than anything for Syria and her to be friends, but Callus interjected and said that it would be a breach of etiquette to refer to someone that you were not close to by their first name on hearing the word etiquette. Lena screamed and broke down. She told Callus that he had no idea how much she had been suffering and restraining herself. And now the Duke was asking her to return to the high church, which was terrifying to her. She was distressed that she would lose a dear friend. She stated that Callus had no idea how many times her world had changed since he said that he would be her protector and take care of her. Was it all a lie? He would never know how happy she was at that moment when she heard him speak those words. And thought that she was right, that she came from another world. He apologized for his behavior, asked her not to cry, and promised that he would be by her side this last time. After spending some time, Lena was a little calmer and told him she wanted to visit the glacier. When asked why, she stated that now she was a stern, and she wanted to help Syria with her duties, hoping that it would improve the relationship. Callus understood that her feelings held her negatively because of her condition. Lena didn't take that rejection nicely and told him to stop talking about the objections. She was going to do it even if she had to do it alone. He told himself that if something happened to Lena, it would be his name that would be damaged, so he agreed to accompany her, but he wanted to make it quick. The next morning, Lenin could be seen talking to the Duke, and the Duke was asking him about the whereabouts of the saint. It was reported that the pair had left the premises, and now they had lost all contact with them. He believed that the pair got caught up in a storm and lost their bearings. The Duke remarked that Callus must be out of his mind, and he also questioned whether he intended for Lady Syria to die.
That's all for today. See you in the next episode, friends. Until then, keep reading manga.